Hello guys, I'm going to give a possible history reaction of Golden Dragon Gaming. As it is, can you please like and subscribe and go to possible history gaming. History. And not to subscribe to him. He's almost at 300,000 subscribers and I think that'll be good for him. As it is, I'm gonna watch it and talk about what I like and what I want and dislike, I think. But now, no one can stop me from watching it. So, let's get to it.
The final Axis powers have been defeated, but disagreements over the future of the world are threatening to tear apart former allies. Luckily, there is a simple solution. Let's instead present the case to the possible history viewers. So far, their track record as diplomats is unmatched, with absolutely perfect solutions to the Napoleonic Wars and a division of Africa that ensured peace for all time. I'm sure they will do great this time too. Now I do have to applaud you. The turnout to this peace conference was gigantic. The big three, cynically, put all of their faith in the collective wisdom of over 17,000 viewers. And the next vote, which will be the biggest one yet, is already ready too. Subscribe to be notified for that. But for now, let's see how you fix the world after World War II. A lot of territory is up for discussion, and let's start with the weak underbelly, Italy. In our timeline, the Italians lost very little in Europe, only losing Albania, Istria and some Greek islands. Will you be as kind to the Italians? Let's start small. The Italians would have to give up the Austrian portion of southern Tyrol, giving it to whomever gets Austria later. But interestingly, in the Istrian Peninsula, not all is lost to the Yugoslavs, as Italy secures themselves the southern portion. All in all, not either big changes for Italy. But wait a minute, did I say Italy? I must have misspoken. I of course mean northern Italy. Following the end of World War II, Italy was cut in half. The kingdom likely survives in a rather conservative south, while northern Italy finds itself under social democracy, as the communists and socialists are elected into power democratically. But two Italys, that's not enough. When the Italian dictator was asked, how often do you think of... He just started rambling about how Rome civilized the whole known world and it was the best thing to ever happen for just about 3 hours. It became really awkward. To prevent Italy from going on the warpath again, we had to sever their ties to Rome. So, the Papal State was on warpath again, we had to sever their ties to Rome. So, the Papal State was enlarged around the capital to remove Rome from either Italian state. Alright, with a
quick thing, if I were to time travel, how God is it, to when the end of World War II, I would say that Russia, to do stuff, I say, I'm from the future. Let's say I telephone from them, I'm from the future a bit. Hey, just to let you know, listen, just here's something. Build trail traffic, alright? That manage resources, exports and man travel, okay? And build more industry, more jobs, more things, and more farms, alright? So you don't so it'll be that you need Ukraine's crops, alright? Where okay, if let's say you collapse, you don't. And if they do agree, I think it'll be
brighter futures
before World War II.
secured for Italy, the big three are becoming increasingly confident in your ability to create peace. The next task on the docket, the savage land of the Balkans. And in real life, the Balkan peace deal was a complete joke. Bulgaria had lost the war, yet after, they somehow found themselves expanding, being allowed to keep southern Dobruja. That's a joke. Luckily, you guys were very, very harsh on Bulgaria this time around. Immediately, the Bulgarians lose a good chunk of their south to the Greeks, but they are allowed to keep southern Dobruja.
But you should have not let them keep southern Dobruja, okay?
Yeah, but I somewhat feel like I'm forgetting something. Oh yeah, Bulgaria doesn't exist anymore, being completely folded into Yugoslavia. Now we just need to discuss small Albania. The Greeks were being such crybabies for having been invaded through Albania, so, as compensation, the Greeks could seize southern Albania too. Peace in the Balkans.
I think they should have voted for like Italy to lose a lot of land, but they lost this part just...
Secured, I'd say. But now everyone, make sure you're serious. The peace deal in Africa will get insane. Libya gets independence. Yeah, I know, we're getting a bit unrealistic here. Then, in the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia gets to annex both Italian colonies in the region. Phew, alright, we got through the hard part. Back to Europe, let's complete our southern Europe. By now, Europe is entirely devoid of ultra-nationalist forces. Well, not entirely. One unstable state of unstandable ultra-nationalists still holds out against the forces of the Allies. But Stalin has an idea. The West should finish the job and invade Spain to restore democracy. With this, our new southern Europe is completed, with an interesting mix of socialism and democracy. Though, interestingly, neither Italy nor Yugoslavia are Soviet puppets, despite their socialist governments. Seeing the amazing future Southern Europe is headed towards, Stalin is finally convinced that the viewers will also be fair when dealing with Eastern Europe. Both before and after the war, the Soviets have struggled extremely hard in securing control over the region. I am sure the possible history viewers will recognize this fact and compensate the Soviets fairly for their war struggles. Let's start with Romania. Before the war, the Soviets had taken Bessarabia. You decided that the Soviets should return this territory, but Romania will turn into a Soviet puppet. A fair compromise, I would say. But not all is well for Romania, as northern Transylvania is disputed between it and Hungary. You decided to resolve this dispute in Hungary's favor, but Hungary would also become a Soviet puppet. For now, things seem well enough for the Soviets. Next up, Slovakia. Should they keep their independence? No. Czechoslovakia is completely restored to their pre-war Slovakian border. But they don't become a Soviet puppet. Instead, their democracy is restored and even strengthened after the war. Now the Czechs do have a big issue, as there are a lot of Germans living in the Sudetenland. Whatever ends up happening to Germany, this issue needs to be solved. Luckily, you guys realized one crucial fact. If we give the Sudetenland to Germany, the Germans can't demand it later on. Genius. Another problem expertly solved. But now, perhaps the greatest prize in Eastern Europe is Poland. Let's see what compromise you cooked up for them. The Soviets had taken a significant chunk of territory from the Poles during the war, but it was decided that they had to return these territories. Alright, interesting, but surely the Soviets get influence in the new state, right? Nope. In fact, in just about the worst possible outcome from the Soviets, the pre-war military regime returns, as an authoritarian anti-communist government. Alright, that may not be ideal. What about Finland? Much like in Poland, the Soviets had seized some territories during the war. Yeah, you guessed it, they have to give this land back too. I'm starting to think that Stalin is heavily regretting this decision. Anyway, we have one final subject to end Eastern Europe on, the Baltic states. You know the story by now. The Soviets annexed them during the war, but democracy is stronger than force, and Stalin has to retreat here too, and Lithuania expands a little bit. To make things even worse, the Baltic states have become Western democracies as well. Yeah, I'm sure the Soviets will never regret and try to reverse this peace conference. Peace in the East is secure.
Oh my god! Ow! Oh my god! Why is there a tire?
Quick intermission video, and more importantly, you can already vote for the next episode, about the treaties following World War I from the description below. Just please, finish the video first. Alright, it's time to pivot to Asia. First, the future of the colonies and the territories captured by Japan during the war. Let's start with the British Raj, the most important colony in the region. We all know the common options. Some type of division along religious lines, or a united subcontinent. Which one did you guys pick? Neither. You decided that the subcontinent should be completely balkanized, roughly around ethno-linguistic lines. That's certainly a choice. Interestingly, he went the opposite direction with French Indochina. The French are forced to leave, but the entire region is united into a new state, likely under Ho Chi Minh, but especially as time goes on, this would start to look more and more like Vietnamese domination over the others. Now Thailand had joined the war on Japan's side, but they are left without consequences, as Japan had forced them into the conflict. Now as the Dutch are forced to abandon Indonesia, the region is forced to be completely divided, roughly along ethnic, religious and language lines. To add to the chaos, British Malaysia would unite with Malay regions of Indonesia, creating this horrendous but massively powerful Malay state. To the east too, Australia has to let go of eastern Papua, creating a unified island. To complete Southeast Asia, the Philippines would gain their independence. But we've obviously left the best for last, as we still have Japan to deal with. Surprisingly, their losses are minor. Southern Sakhalin is given to the Soviets, and Korea, under a joint US-Soviet provisional government, holds a free election. The American candidate comes out on top, unifying the peninsula under capitalism. Now in Manchuria, a very strange thing occurs. Despite the Han Chinese having an absolute majority in the region, a new Manchu Qing state is created, undoubtedly with population transfers between the two states being planned. Similarly, Mongolia sees major expansion, which turns them majority Han Chinese as well, and without
crazy if you let them add like this far. They would have learned
major.
I wonder how that would go. But I was like to say, if you didn't do this, they're confused and stupid. Like, it should have been like Britain keeps the
expansion, which turns them majority Han Chinese as well, and without removing the Han from these regions, both are likely to be extremely unstable. Anyways, what happens to Japan itself? The US installs a new democratic regime in the state, giving the US major control over East Asia. But things will get even better for the Americans, as they are allowed to take control over the island of Taiwan, with promises to return it to China as soon as the chaos is over, because let's be honest, the communists have no actual chance of winning the Civil War. Am I right, guys? Guys? Anyway, I'm sure this will not become an issue into the future at all. And once again, kudos on a job well done, viewers. Asia has been fixed. Alright, back to you. It's now time for the division of the German Empire. The first question is, should a German state even exist? Ever since the formation of a German state, they have broken the balance of power in Europe and caused trouble again and again. Perhaps it's time to say enough and remove Germany from the map again. You guys agreed. But before we see what replaces it, we have some foreign states nibbling at the German borders. Poland expands completely into Silesia, which means this Sudeten territory cannot go to Germany without creating a pseudo-landlocked enclave. So we'll hand it over to Czechoslovakia instead. In the north, Denmark pushes all the way onto Holstein, gaining them control over the Kiel Canal, meaning Denmark now has full control over who does and doesn't get to enter the Baltic Sea. In the west, Luxembourg is expanded into German territory, while the Dutch gain a frankly excessive amount of German territory, including the major cities like Köln and Aachen. All in all, Germany was severely mutilated in this piecing. But we've yet to carve up Germany itself. In the south, we see a restoration of the pre-1870 German kingdoms, as well as a Habsburg Austrian state, which also expands into Tyrol and the Sudetenland. These southern German states then find themselves in a confederation under the Habsburgs. These new states are all monarchies, adding a strange new twist to the post-war political makeup of Europe. But the north may just be more interesting. In East Prussia, neither Lithuania nor Poland gets anything, as instead a Prussian state is recreated, led by Wilhelm III von Hohenzollern, son to the late Wilhelm II. Clearly, the return of these monarchs are meant to restore order and stability to the German region. Moving west, the Prussians also regain Pomerania and Eastern Germany, resulting in a Prussia that looks like it was transported from 2 centuries ago. To the south, we have a restoration of the Saxon kingdom as well, which sees expansion into the Sudetenland. Now finally, we have Western Germany. First, a state is created in the remaining Rhineland, but this one is a democratic republic, not a monarchy like the rest. To complete our map of Europe, a Hanoverian and Hessian state are also rebuilt, with their respective royals returning. But we can't just leave Germany like this, as each of the states would be too weak to ensure stability. The 4 North German kingdoms also federate under the Hohenzollerns. Now this new Germany is surprisingly stable. Should the Hohenzollerns or the Habsburg get any crazy ideas, their federated kingdoms are more than powerful enough to stop their crazy leaders. So, as we look upon our hard work today, this is the new Europe we have created. An interesting mix of Western democracies, communism and socialism, 2 surviving dictatorships, and a bunch of kingdoms returning. We even have a theocracy under the Pope. A very interesting outcome, which I am sure the West is extremely content with. Especially since the kingdoms and dictatorships will also prefer the West over communism, resulting in de facto Western domination over Europe. Now subscribe to join me Saturday, when I explore a continuation of this scenario. For now though, I invite you all to the comments, where you can vote for the ultimate conclusion of World War I. Not just can you rewrite the former Central Powers, but you will also get control. Last week, I asked my viewers to vote on alternate peace deals to end World War II, and I must be honest, the result was so chaotic, I banged my head against the wall to work out a somewhat realistic, but also fun script of where the world goes from it. Final warning for the people who want to avoid spoilers. Alright, this is... Can I have the attention of the class for 1 second? Thank you. Today we have an interesting lesson. We have previously discussed the horrors of World War I and how, over the course of 4 years, Europe was pushed to its limits, with a civil war in Russia followed by the gradual collapse of the Central Powers. With the war now over, the delegates of the Entente met up in Paris and would decide on the fate of Europe. Today, we will discover the new Europe forged at this peace deal, exploring the great power motivations that shaped the continent. Starting off with the minor state of Bulgaria, they had conquered Dobruja from the Romanians during the war. They would be allowed to keep this territory, so that the new border lay across the Danube, making an offensive war between the Romanians and Bulgarians more difficult. The Serbians then would not be allowed to make any gains into Bulgaria, and for a little while it seemed like Bulgaria would get a pretty good deal. That is, until Greece got involved. Britain decided to heavily support the Greek state and gave them not just the entirety of Thrace, but also a fat strip of southern Bulgaria too, to serve as a buffer for future Bulgarian pushes to the coast. With the fate of Bulgaria secured, we moved to Albania. They had only become an independent state in 1912, and its existence was always in question, as just about every neighboring state desired to annex parts of them. Italy, after much complaining, was allowed to turn Albania into their protectorate, directly annexing the port of Vlorë in the process. But fears of a future Italian invasion of Greece would result in them gaining the defensible south. Montenegro then would form a union with the Serbians, but Serbia was unable to secure northern Albania for themselves. Then we move on to the Habsburg Balkan territories. Serbia had great designs on this region to form a huge Yugoslav state, but Italy would heavily oppose these plans. Italian pressure would see a Croatian state, separate from Serbia, be created, securing a lot of Dalmatia. The south, though, would pass to Italy, giving Italy an extremely strong position to dominate the Western Balkan from. But Serbia wouldn't be left in the cold, as they did get Bosnia and parts of Vojvodina. Dreams of a Yugoslavia remain, but for now, Serbia is simply Greater Serbia. Moving up, Slovenia would be united with Croatia, and plans to expand them into southern Austria are past. In fact, thanks to Italian and French pressure, Austria would lose all of these western territories in the peace deal. France wanted to strip Tyrol, giving it to Switzerland. This way,
what if the treaties of the world one fraudulent, because then get the spread, okay, and like a bit more land on top, like, and just expanded a bit more on top.
the neutral state can stand as a barrier for any aggressive war across the Alps. Italy's claimed territories in Istria and Tyrol were also granted, with even further gains to act as strategic depth, just in case a resurgent Germany would seek a reconquest. This leads us to the Hungarian portion of the empire. Slovakia would gain independence, but as a small state. The Entente delegates had decided that Hungary shouldn't be punished too harshly, arguing it's not the Hungarians that wanted this war, it was the Austrians. Similarly, a too radical expansion of Romania was rejected. They would only gain southern Transylvania, with Hungary retaining control over the northern parts. With Romania gaining Moldova, the Balkan parts of the peace deal were done. The Entente have attempted to keep Hungary, Romania and Serbia all somewhat similar in power, so that none of them can dominate the region. Still, by far most of the nations were unhappy about the new situation, and historians have put serious doubts on what the Entente were thinking with this peace deal. Anyways, onto the remainder of the Austrian portion. Czechia and Slovakia would unite. But in another questionable decision, the Sudetenland would remain with the Austrians. This provided multiple issues. If Germany were to become resurgent and unify with Austria, Czechoslovakia now has no natural defenses to stand up to their giant neighbor. Beyond that, the Sudetenland is connected very poorly to the rest of Austria, which, as we will learn next week, can cause significant administrative issues. The Poles have managed to achieve independence after the war. France especially saw in Poland the potential for a great bulwark against Russia and Germany. As such, they would be allowed to gain the entirety of Austrian Galicia, as well as disputed territories with the Czechs. With that, the Austro-Hungarian Empire has ceased to exist. And the borders created here would be amongst the most criticized in the post-war world. I'm sorry for the quick intermission, but by far most of you aren't subscribed. To keep up to date with the 2 videos I release every single week, consider doing so. Thank you. Then it's time to learn about the African peace deal, which really isn't that interesting. East Africa to Britain, Namibia to South Africa, Cameroon to France, and Togo to France as well. With that, the German African Empire was partitioned. The Pacific Peace Deal was similarly simple. Britain gained German Papua, and all other Pacific territories would be transferred to the Japanese, granting them significant influence over the oceans. Onto a more impactful peace deal, we all know that the Middle East today isn't the most peaceful in the world, and that is mostly to blame on this peace deal. France and Britain wanted to carve out their own empires in the region, but the American delegates demanded that the promises to the Arabs be kept, causing the creation of a unified Hashemite Arab state. But that is not all, as Yemen and Kurdistan were also added to the nation. In retrospect, it should have been clear that such a sudden unification of this diverse of a region was a bad idea. But at the time, the American president really believed that he was doing the world a favor. So, things were already looking bleak for the Turks, losing half of their empire. But it can get far, far worse. After the Turks, under Mustafa Kemal, kept fighting, rejecting the first peace deal, the Entente became determined to destroy the Ottoman state. While proposals like an Italian colony in Anatolia were rejected, in the east a major Armenian state would be created. Retribution for Turkish atrocities during the war. Then, Pontus had declared unification with Greece, and with Entente backing, the Greeks marched into Constantinople, crossing the Bosphorus and creating a land bridge to Pontus. Finally, the Greeks would march down the western coastline. Even the biggest Greek nationalist wouldn't have been able to predict such a whopping success for Greece. The Ottomans would obviously collapse during this ordeal, replaced with a struggling Turkish Republic. This moves us onto the Russian Empire. Having collapsed into civil war between the Red and White armies, the Entente would push extremely hard to have the White forces emerge victorious, managing to re-establish the Russian Tsardom, with Nicholas II returning as the absolute monarch of Russia. Next week, we will learn what he turns Russia into after his return. Either way, the sheer amount of support that Britain gave to Russia would deplete their treasury and would largely fuel Britain's withdrawal from world politics after the war. But the return wasn't simple for Nicholas. While he leads Russia again, Russia is now significantly smaller. Japan has sponsored a democratic counter-regime in the east, as well as a breakaway Siberian state. Suddenly, Russia has lost access to the Pacific. But it gets worse. The Trans-Siberian Railway was constructed to ensure Russia can easily access their eastern territory. But, again thanks to Japanese interference, the Mongolians would march north significantly, gaining control over this key railway and becoming a strong Japanese ally. Russia would need to struggle greatly to restore eastern relevance. In Central Asia, various independence movements have succeeded. But they quickly realized that they cannot hope to stand up to foreign invaders by themselves. So once again, with Japanese influence, a Central Asian Federation was set up, allying itself to Japan as well. These developments would fuel Japan's future focus on dominating continental Asia, investing into their army rather than navy, and mostly giving up on their dreams to destroy the European empires. But I am getting ahead of myself. That is for next week's lesson. Let's move on to the Caucasus. Much like in Central Asia, several new independent states emerge, none of which could resist Russian reconquest. So they too united into a federation. Still, their future also looks bleak. Religious conflicts immediately played up the instability of the new state. To make matters worse, unlike Mongolia and the Central Asian Federation, the Caucasus Union has no great power backer. The fact that this state collapses shouldn't be a shock to anyone. Onto the Western territories, the most important ones lost by Russia, Finland had declared independence and seized significant eastern territories. In the Baltics, 3 new states came into existence. But not for long. Estonia would request integration into the Kingdom of Finland. The Kingdom of Finland itself had trouble finding themselves a king, and eventually landed on King Gustav of Sweden. Reluctantly, the Swedish government accepted the new Swedish-Finnish unity, bringing Sweden back to the European scene. Then the Poles conquered major territories from the Russians in the west, before also conquering Lithuania, declaring a reformed Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. But that's not all. The Poles would significantly support the Ukrainians, allowing them to achieve independence and secure territory up to the Black Sea. This brings us back to Europe. Before we get to the final Central Power member, a quick detour to Ireland. The South had declared independence, and with American pressure, Britain would respect this Irish declaration, even being forced to cede the North as well, making Ireland fully independent, but also worsening relations between Britain and America. That finally leads us to Germany itself. The Entente were united in a common goal. Germany must be punished. Starting in the west, the French got all of Alsace-Lorraine, completing their goal for the war. Belgium and Luxembourg then both expanded as well, with France pushing for a common defense union in the west, now with more strategic depth. Up north then, the Kiel Canal gives Germany control over the Baltic Sea. To prevent this, Denmark was not just expanded up to it, but all the way into Holstein. The Danish king personally opposed this land transfer, arguing that Denmark did not need all of these Germans in their nation, but the British and French forced Denmark to accept the land grant. Then finally, the French did try to push for a complete partition of Germany, but the other Entente considered this to go too far. The bulk of Germany would be respected. Still, some changes in the east were necessary. Poland needed access to the Baltic Sea, and so was awarded the Polish Strip. France argued Danzig should go to Poland too, but Britain and the US reasoned that Poland can also get naval access through Lithuania. which would also make Lithuania a more important region that Poland cannot just ignore and oppress. Germany would be allowed to keep control over Königsberg and Danzig. But in the south, something strange happened. An independent Prussian state was created just there. This was an idea from France, preventing Germany from stationing forces there, meaning Poland doesn't have to worry about a two-front war when they go to war with Germany. Still, critics, correctly, maintained that this Prussian state will always seek to reunite with Germany at the earliest opportunity. Finally, the Poles would achieve modest expansion into Silesia on the basis of nationality. This only leaves southern Germany to be discussed, and with the Entente still paranoid about the potential of a German union with Austria, an independent Bavarian state would be created as well, to prevent such an easy unification. And that's it. We have now discussed the entire peace deal, and the new Europe is created. But it's very clearly a Europe riddled with issues. And this status quo is most certainly not lasting. In next week's class, we shall explore how this Europe exploded in on itself. But for now... Alright class, welcome back. As you may remember, last week we went over how Europe came to go from this to this after the devastation...
Alright guys, that is like and subscribe and go to Possible History, and if he does this again, don't do this stupid shit. Okay, but as it is, bye.